When my own son stands on the front porch of the house I paid for, with his hand resting on the doorknob like I am some stranger trying to force my way in, I feel the whole world tilt beneath my feet. My suitcase is lying on the lawn, not packed, dumped. My winter coat is half in the mud. My late husband's framed photograph is leaning against a flower pot. And my daughter-in-law Renee folds her arms across her chest and says, in that smooth, cold voice of hers, "Jessica, please don't make a scene. This is our home now. Our home now." I stare at them, at the lock they have already changed, at the curtains I sewed with my own 2 hands hanging in the window behind them, and for one long second I cannot breathe. My name is Jessica Opare, and this is the story of how the people I loved most kicked me out with nothing, and how I came back with more power than they ever imagined. Let me take you back to where it all started. I was 64 years old when I learned that love without boundaries can become an invitation for disrespect. Before all of this, my life was simple, not glamorous, not grand, just honest. I had been married to my husband, Samuel Opare, for 36 years. We built our life the old-fashioned way, dollar by dollar, prayer by prayer, sacrifice by sacrifice. Samuel worked nights driving freight trucks, and I worked at an elementary school cafeteria for 22 years. On weekends I baked pound cakes and meat pies for church events, and took in sewing when extra money was needed. That little brick house on Ashbury Lane was not just a house to us. It was our proof that 2 steady people with calloused hands and tired backs could still build something beautiful. We bought it when Daniel, our only child, was 6 years old. I still remember the day we moved in. Daniel ran through the empty living room shouting, "This one's my room. No, this one. No, this one." Samuel laughed so hard he had to sit down on a paint bucket. I stood in the kitchen with a single wooden spoon and 1 dented pot, and I thought, "Lord, thank you. This is enough. This is more than enough." And for many years it was. Daniel grew up in that house. He scraped his knees in the driveway. He did homework at the round oak table in the dining room. He cried in my lap when he was 15 and his first girl, and left him. When Samuel died from a stroke 4 years before this story began, it was Daniel who stood beside me at the cemetery, holding my elbow while the wind lifted the edges of my black hat. He said, "Mom, you're not alone. I'll always take care of you." I believed him. That is the dangerous thing about love. When it comes from your child, you don't inspect it too closely. You receive it. You rest in it. You trust it. A year after Samuel passed, Daniel and his wife, Renee, started having financial troubles. They had 1 daughter, my granddaughter Kayla, who was 9 at the time. Their rent had gone up twice. Renee's online clothing boutique was not doing as well as she claimed. Daniel's hours at work had been cut, though he spoke about it vaguely with that embarrassed little laugh men use when they are trying not to admit they are scared. One Sunday afternoon, after church, they sat in my living room and asked if they could stay with me for just a few months. Renee clasped her hands and said, "Mama Jessica, it would only be temporary, just until we get ahead." Daniel looked tired. "Truly tired, Mom, I hate asking, but it would help us so much. Now, if you are listening to me, and you have ever looked at your grown child and still seen the little boy who used to fall asleep on your shoulder, then you already know what I said." I said yes before he even finished asking. I told them they could take the larger bedroom at the back of the house. I said Kayla could use the room across from mine. I cleared closet space. I moved Samuel's winter coats from the hallway cupboard into storage. I started buying more groceries, more cereal, more milk, more laundry soap. My pension was not large, but I stretched it the way women of my generation know how to stretch anything. Meat, money, patience, silence. At first it felt almost joyful. The house sounded alive again. Kayla's laughter bounced down the hallway. Daniel drank coffee with me in the mornings. Renee even helped me repaint the guest bathroom a soft cream color. On Friday evenings, we sometimes sat together in the den and watched old singing competition shows while I hemmed church skirts and Kayla braided my hair. Looking back, Those were the moments that made what came later so hard to accept, because betrayal from an enemy wounds you one way. Betrayal from family wounds you twice, once when it happens, and once when you remember how safe you used to feel. There were warning signs, of course, little ones, the sort of things a wiser woman might have noticed sooner. Renee was always making comments about the house, not cruel comments at first, just little observations dressed up as compliments. She would run her hand along the fireplace mantel and say, "This place has such good bones. With the right upgrades, it could sell for a fortune." Or she would stand in the kitchen and say, "You know, older people sit on so much hidden wealth and don't even realize it. Older people." Not mothers, not parents, older people. Daniel started asking where I kept important documents. "Just in case of emergencies, Mom," he said one evening while helping me carry groceries in. "You should have everything organized." I told him I kept the deed, insurance papers, and tax records in a blue accordion file inside the hall closet, top shelf. I even laughed and said, "If I ever go missing, don't let your wife throw out my papers and my spice jars." He laughed too. Renee did not. Then there were the changes in the house, small at first. My yellow kitchen curtains disappeared one Tuesday and were replaced with grey blinds I had never asked for. Samuel's old leather chair was moved to the basement because, according to Renee, it made the living room feel heavy. The framed family portraits in the hallway were taken down for cleaning and not put back up for weeks. Every time I questioned something, Renee had an answer ready. "We're just trying to freshen things up. We're making it more functional. We thought you would appreciate the help." And Daniel, my Daniel, who once noticed if I changed my perfume, began to say the same words over and over. "Mom, don't stress about little things." That phrase became a curtain. It covered everything. Then came the papers. It was a Thursday in late March, rainy and dull, the kind of afternoon when the sky looks tired. Daniel came into the kitchen while I was peeling sweet potatoes and said, "Mom, I need your signature on a few forms." I did not even look up right away. "What kind of forms?" He set a stack of papers beside the sugar bowl. "Nothing major, just some documents so I can help you with repairs on the house. The roof estimate came in high, and if we bundle a few things together, we can get better rates. It'll make the house safer for you long term." That did sound sensible. The roof was old, one gutter sagged near the garage. And I had mentioned more than once that I wanted the bathtub replaced with a walk-in shower. Renee came in right then, almost too quickly, carrying a pen. She smiled. "See, Daniel is always thinking ahead. We just want to make sure you're protected." Protected. I wiped my hands and sat down. There were many pages. Far too many for nothing major, if you ask me now. But in that moment, I saw official. Looking forms, tabs, lines for initials, stamps, a business card clipped to the front. Daniel pointed where I should sign. "Here, Mom, and here." I frowned. Shouldn't I read these? He let out a little laugh. "Of course, if you want. It's just legal language. Same information repeated different ways." Renee added, "Mama Jessica, by the time you finish reading legal paperwork, the contractors will retire." I should have insisted. Lord knows I should have insisted. But it was my son, my own child, standing in my kitchen. Rain tapping the window, sweet potatoes on the counter, a casserole dish soaking in the sink, the ordinary sound of my life all around me. Nothing looked like danger, so I signed. I initialed where Daniel pointed. I signed once, twice, maybe 5 times. A mobile notary came later that evening. A woman with glossy red nails and a clipboard who checked my driver's license and watched me sign one final page. She did not explain anything. Neither did Daniel. When she left, Renee kissed my cheek and said, "One less thing to worry about." And for a while I believed that too. 3 weeks passed, then 6. The repairs never began. When I asked Daniel about it, he said permits were delayed. When I asked again, he said the contractor had family problems. When I asked a third time, he said, a little sharply, "Mom, these things take time." By then, other things were changing. Bills stopped coming in the mail. Daniel said he had switched them to paperless to simplify the household. My bank sent a notice about unusual activity, but Daniel intercepted it before I could see it and claimed it was junk. Renee began locking the small desk drawer in the den where I kept church records and receipts. One Saturday morning I reached for my blue accordion file in the hall closet and found empty space. I stood on the step stool for a full minute, staring. Then I called out, "Daniel, have you seen my file folder, the blue one?" He appeared at the end of the hallway, phone in hand. "I moved it somewhere safer." "Where?" "In my office bag, I think. I'll get it later." Later never came. A week after that, I overheard a conversation I was never meant to hear. It was nearly midnight. I had gone to the kitchen for warm milk because I could not sleep. As I came down the hallway, I heard Renee whispering sharply in the den. "I don't care what she thinks," she said. "Once everything clears, we won't need her permission for anything." Daniel sounded nervous. "Just lower your voice." Renee snapped. "No, you lower your fear. We already came this far." I froze. The milk glass in my hand felt suddenly slippery. Then Kayla called out from her room, and the sound broke the moment. By the time I moved again, the den door opened and Daniel stepped out. He looked startled to see me. "Mom, you're up late." I searched his face. "What are you two talking about?" "Nothing important, business stuff. At my age, you learn to hear the truth in what people avoid saying." But I still did not understand what kind of business was happening inside my home while I slept under the same roof. The betrayal itself came on a Tuesday. I remember every detail because pain has a way of engraving itself into the body. It was exactly 3:47 in the afternoon when my phone rang. I had been at the church fellowship hall helping arrange flowers for a funeral service. The call was from my neighbor, Miss Gloria, who had lived across the street from me for 19 years and had never once phoned me in a panic. "Jessica," she said, breathless, "you need to come home right now." My hands went cold. "What happened? Is someone hurt?" She lowered her voice. "Baby, your things are outside." For a second, I did not understand the sentence. My things. On the lawn, suitcases, boxes, that little cedar chest Samuel gave you. Come now. I cannot explain to you what it feels like for your body to know something terrible before your mind catches up. I remember dropping the flower ribbon onto the fellowship hall floor. I remember my keys shaking in my hand so badly I could barely fit them into the ignition. I remember driving too fast and praying out loud, "Please, Lord, let this be some kind of mistake." But when I turned onto Ashbury Lane, I saw it. My life scattered across the front yard, a black trash bag full of clothes, 2 framed photographs leaning against the mailbox, a lamp with the shade bent, my sewing basket, my winter coat, one of Samuel's Bibles. Miss Gloria was standing at the edge of her driveway, arms folded tightly over her chest, looking furious on my behalf. And there on the porch were Daniel and Renee. Daniel did not come down the steps. That hurt more than I can say. A son who loves you runs toward your confusion. He does not wait above you like a landlord. I got out of the car and called his name. "Daniel, what is this?" Renee answered before he could. "Jessica, we discussed this." I stared at her. "No, we did not." Daniel finally spoke, but he would not meet my eyes. "Mom, please stay calm." My heart began to pound so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Stay calm, my things are on the grass." "Why are my things on the grass?" Renee took one step forward, still keeping the screen door half closed behind her. "This arrangement is no longer working. There has been too much tension in the house." I looked at Daniel. "What is she talking about?" He rubbed his jaw the way he used to when he was lying as a child. "Mom, maybe it would be better if you stayed somewhere else for a while." "For a while." There are phrases people use when they are too cowardly to speak plainly. I walked toward the steps. "Give me my keys." Renee's face hardened. "You don't have keys anymore." I stopped. The sky seemed suddenly too bright. "The air too thin. What do you mean I don't have keys anymore?" Daniel swallowed. Then he said the words that split my life into before and after. "Mom, the house is in my name now." I felt my knees weaken. "What?" He finally looked at me then, and there was guilt in his eyes, yes, but also something worse. Resolve, you signed the transfer papers months ago. I just stood there. I heard a dog barking 2 houses down. I heard a car door slam somewhere behind me. I heard Miss Gloria say, "Lord, have mercy," under her breath. But mostly I heard my own pulse roaring, "No." I said quietly, "No." I signed repair documents. Renee gave a small laugh. I will never forget that sound. You signed what was put in front of you. I turned to Daniel. Tell her to stop. Tell her this joke has gone far enough. He said very softly, "It's not a joke." My mouth went dry. You tricked me. He flinched. Mom, please. We did what we had to do. The house was wasted sitting in one person's name when all of us live here and contribute. Contribute. I repeated. My voice came out thin and strange. Contribute. I fed you. I opened my home to you. Renee lifted her chin. And now we're establishing boundaries. That word boundaries coming from the woman standing inside my house while my belongings sat in the dirt nearly took the breath from my body. I climbed the steps then, not running, not screaming, just walking, because some part of me still believed if I got close enough, if I looked directly into my son's face, this madness would break. "Daniel," I said, standing one step below him, "look at me. I am your mother. Open this door." His eyes filled for just a second. "Mom, please don't do this out here." "Out here," I whispered. "You put me out here." I reached for the doorknob, and Renee moved between us. "I wouldn't," she said coldly. "We've already changed the locks." Miss Gloria started toward us, but I lifted a hand without turning around. I did not want witnesses stepping into family pain. That is one of the mistakes older women make. We protect the dignity of people who are actively destroying ours. I looked at Daniel again. "My medicine is inside." He nodded toward a small plastic grocery bag on the porch floor. "We packed what you need for a few days." A few days. That was when I understood this was not confusion. Not anger, not a family quarrel that could be smoothed over after dinner. This was a plan. My voice dropped low. "Where are my documents?" Renee answered. "Anything important is already handled." "Handled? Oh God," I said, though not loudly. More like a realization than a prayer. I bent slowly, picked up the plastic bag with my pills, then looked back at the yard. My life, my memories, my marriage, my dignity, piled into trash bags like leftovers no one wanted. I said, "You have shamed yourselves." Daniel's face crumpled for one instant, but Renee touched his arm, and whatever softness was there vanished. He said, "Mom, Lydia has already agreed you can stay with her." I stared at him. "You arranged where I would sleep before telling me I was being thrown out." Silence. That silence told me everything. Miss Gloria came to stand beside me then. Her voice was firm. "Jessica, come on. We are not doing this in front of these people." These people. I had never heard her speak about my family that way before. I turned back one last time and said, "This is not over." Renee gave a little shrug. "It is for today." No, it was only beginning, and what I did not know, not yet, was that being put out of my own home was only the first layer of what they had done to me. That first night, I slept in Lydia's guest room, with my handbag under my pillow, like a frightened child. Lydia and I had been friends since our 30s. She was a retired nurse, plain spoken, sensible, the kind of woman who ironed pillowcases and did not believe in foolishness. When Miss Gloria called her to explain what had happened, Lydia did not ask questions over the phone. She simply said, "Bring Jessica here." Once the bedroom door was closed, I sat on the edge of the bed and finally let myself shake. Not cry, shake. There is a difference. Crying is sorrow leaving the body. Shaking is the body realizing it is no longer safe. Lydia came in carrying chamomile tea in a mug with blue flowers on it. She set it on the nightstand and looked at me carefully. "Tell me exactly what happened." So I did. I told her about the papers, the changed locks, the lawn. The words Daniel used, the way Renee stood between me and my own front door. When I finished, Lydia said just one thing. "You need a lawyer." I stared at her, a lawyer against my own son. She pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. Jessica, listen to me very carefully. What you are describing is not a misunderstanding. It is not bad manners. It is legal behavior. That means your response has to be legal too. I looked down at my hands. They were still trembling. Part of me wanted to say no. Part of me still wanted to protect Daniel from the consequences of Daniel's own actions. That is the curse of motherhood. Even after your child stabs you in the back, your first instinct is to ask whether the knife hurt his hand. The next morning I called him. He did not answer. I called again at 8:13, again at 8:19, again at 8:46. Finally at 9:02 Renee picked up. Hello. I closed my eyes, put my son on the phone. He doesn't want to speak right now. I sat straighter. I am not discussing this with you. She gave a soft sigh, like I was being difficult in a store checkout line. Jessica, this will go easier if you accept reality. Reality, I said. My reality is that I opened my home to you, and you repaid me by throwing me onto the street. Her tone sharpened. No one threw you onto the street. We arranged a place for you. I laughed then, not from humor, from disbelief. You arranged exile and want gratitude. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, the house belongs to Daniel now. Fighting that will only make you look unstable. That sentence chilled me more than the lock on the door had, because it was not just cruel, it was strategic. I hung up without another word. 3 hours later, I returned to Ashbury Lane with Lydia, so I could collect the rest of my things. I thought perhaps cooler heads had come in overnight. Perhaps Daniel had regretted what happened. Perhaps the shame of daylight would bring back his conscience. Instead, Renee met us in the driveway with 2 more black bags and a cardboard box. She did not invite us inside. My husband is at work, she said. These are Jessica's remaining personal items. I looked past her shoulder. I could see my dining room chandelier through the front window. I could see the hallway runner rug I bought 15 years ago. I could see the staircase I painted myself after Samuel hurt his back. I want to come inside. No. Lydia stepped forward. On what grounds? Renee smiled without warmth. On the grounds that the homeowner doesn't want conflict. Homeowner. My stomach turned. I opened the cardboard box right there in the driveway. Inside were 3 dresses, 2 pairs of shoes, a stack of old birthday cards, 1 sweater, and my sewing scissors. Not my jewelry, not Samuel's watch, not my tax records, not the cedar box with our marriage certificate, not the photograph albums, not the china from my mother's side of the family. I looked up. Where are the rest of my things? Renee folded her arms. Those belong with the house, belong with the house. Even now, when I repeat those words, I have to stop and steady myself. I said carefully, my wedding ring belonged to me before this house was paid off. My husband's Bible did not grow out of the floorboards. Do not confuse theft with decoration. Her smile vanished. Just then Kayla appeared behind the screen door. My sweet granddaughter. Her eyes were wide and worried. Grandma, she whispered. My whole heart lurched toward her. Baby, are you all right? Before she could answer, Renee turned and said sharply, Go to your room. Kayla looked at me one more time and disappeared. That image still hurts. A child watching grown people build a lie around her. Lydia reached for my arm. Jessica, enough, not here. She was right. My anger was rising, but my power was not in anger. Not yet. Anger without evidence is just noise to people who have already decided to dismiss you. So I got in Lydia's car and left. But what I didn't know was that things were about to get even worse. Over the next several days, I started noticing the full scope of how thoroughly Daniel and Renee had prepared. My pension depose. It did not land in my account on the 1st of the month. When I called the bank, the representative asked, Would you like to verify the updated transfer instructions already on file? Updated transfer instructions. My chest tightened. What updated instructions? There was a pause. Then the woman said, For security reasons, I can only discuss that in person with identification. Lydia drove me to the branch immediately. At 11:26 that morning, I sat across from a young bank manager named Mr. Lewis, who wore a striped tie and looked almost painfully uncomfortable as he scrolled through my account history. Then he turned the monitor slightly toward me. Someone had changed the mailing address on my pension, linked checking account 6 weeks earlier. Someone had also added Daniel as an authorized user for household management support. I felt the blood drain from my face. I did not approve this. Mr. Lewis adjusted his glasses. There appears to be signed authorization. Show me. He hesitated, then printed the form. My signature was there, or something close enough to fool a machine. I looked at it for a long time. If this is mine, I said slowly, then somebody taught my name how to lie. Mr. Lewis glanced at Lydia, then back at me. Mrs. Opare, I recommend you freeze this account immediately. So I did. I froze the account, opened a new one, changed the pension deposit instructions, removed Daniel, added verbal passwords, put alerts on everything. It sounds practical when I say it now, but at the time, each step felt like admitting something unbearable. My son was not confused. He was involved. That same afternoon, I called my church friend Ruth, who had once worked in county records before retiring. I asked her, very quietly, "Can you help me understand how to check property documents?" She said, "Come by tomorrow morning." The next day at 9:40, I sat at Ruth's dining table while she helped me search public records online. There it was, a quitclaim deed filed in the county recorder's office 7 weeks earlier. Transferor, Jessica Ann Opare. Transferee, Daniel Samuel Opare. I felt sick. Ruth read the filing date aloud and then looked at me. "Jessica, this is real." I pressed my hand to my mouth. "No, the filing is real. What they told me is not." She clicked further. Then she went still. "What?" I asked. "There is also a home equity line of credit recorded against the property." I stared at the screen. "What does that mean?" "It means," Ruth said carefully, "that after the title transfer, someone borrowed against the house. Borrowed against the house. Against the home Samuel and I spent 3 decades paying for." I leaned back in the chair, and for a moment I thought I might faint. This wasn't just about forcing me out. This wasn't just about disrespect. This was a plan. They had taken my trust, turned it into paperwork, and used it to reach their hands into the walls of my life. I heard myself whisper, "How could I have been so blind?" Ruth reached across the table and held my wrist. "You were not blind, you were trusting. There is a difference." That helped me more than she knew, because shame is one of the first prisons betrayal tries to lock you in. It tells you that because someone deceived you, you must have deserved it through foolishness. But trust is not foolishness. Abuse of trust is. That night, I could not sleep at all. I lay awake replaying months of conversations. The missing file, the paperless bills, the comments about hidden wealth, the mobile notary, the whispering in the den, the sudden urgency around repairs that never happened. By 2:47 in the morning, I was sitting upright in Lydia's guest bed with one thought pounding in my mind. What else don't I know? The answer came from an unexpected place. At 8:15 the next morning, Miss Gloria called. "Jessica, I hope you're sitting down." I was already tense. "What now?" "They had a photographer at your house yesterday." My heart sank. A photographer. Professional looking. Took pictures of the front room, kitchen, backyard. I thought maybe they were refinancing or something. But then I heard Renee tell the man, "Make sure you get the light in." Primary suite. Primary suite. That was what younger people called the bedroom where Samuel had taken his last breath. I closed my eyes. They're trying to sell it. I think so. Miss Gloria said, and one more thing. A sign company truck came by, but they didn't unload anything. Maybe they changed their mind. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat very still, because anger had finally replaced confusion. For days, hurt had kept me soft. Hurt keeps asking why. Hurt hopes for apology. Hurt waits for the other person to remember your shared humanity. Anger, the right kind of anger, asks a different question. Not why did you do this, but how do I stop you? I called Lydia into the room and told her everything about the deed, the line of credit, the possible sale. She listened, arms folded. When I finished, she said, "Now are you ready for a lawyer?" This time I answered immediately, "Yes." By noon we were sitting in the office of Evelyn Carter, an attorney recommended by Ruth's cousin. Ms. Carter was in her late 50s, elegant without trying, with silver braids pulled into a low bun and the kind of gaze that made dishonesty uncomfortable. She listened without interrupting as I told the story from beginning to end. Then she asked precise questions. Did you receive independent legal counsel before signing? No. Did anyone explain that title was being transferred? No. Did you sign in your capacity as trustee or individual owner? I blinked. Trustee. She set down her pen. Mrs. Opare, how exactly is the house titled? I frowned. In my name? Are you certain? I almost said yes. Then something tugged at my memory, not a full thought. Just an image. Samuel standing at the dining room table 2 years before he died, tapping a folder and saying, "If anything happens to me, don't let anybody rush you through papers. Everything important is set up." I had barely listened at the time. Death felt far away then. Ms. Carter noticed my hesitation, think carefully, and suddenly I remembered the cedar box. The one missing from the things Rene had given back. It had been in the bottom of my closet for years. Samuel kept estate papers there, along with our marriage certificate, his old military discharge form, and the warranty deed from when we paid off the final mortgage balance. "I don't know," I whispered. "I need those papers." Ms. Carter nodded. "Then we start there. Also, we obtained certified copies of every filing. If the house was held in trust, or if signatures were induced through fraud, the transfer may be challenged. If loan documents relied on misrepresentation, that complicates matters even more. For them, the first hopeful words I had heard in days. Ms. Carter leaned forward. "Listen to me. Do not call your son again. Do not threaten anyone. Do not warn them. Quiet is your friend now." That sentence settled over me like armor. Quiet is your friend now. I left her office with a legal pad full of instructions and a strange new feeling inside me. Not peace, not yet purpose. Over the next week, I worked more quietly than I ever had in my life. I requested certified bank records. I pulled county filings. I changed my beneficiaries, passwords, and emergency contacts. I contacted the pension office and reported suspected fraud. I made a list of missing personal property, and with Ms. Carter's guidance, I documented everything down to the minute. At 4:15 p.m., on Friday, something happened that changed everything. Lydia was helping me search through the black bags Renee had given back when she shook out one of my winter scarves, and a folded receipt fell onto the bed. It was from a storage facility across town, Unit 318, rented in Daniel's name. The date on the receipt was 3 days before I was thrown out. I stared at that paper so hard it blurred. Lydia said, "They're storing your things." My mind began racing. The cedar box, the albums, the jewelry, the documents. Maybe they had not thrown everything away. Maybe they had hidden the items that could prove what they had done. Ms. Carter moved quickly. She filed a preservation request through the court as part of the pending fraud complaint and sent notice to the storage facility to retain all contents of Unit 318 pending investigation. 3 days later, we got access. I will never forget opening that metal roll-up door. The air smelled like dust and cardboard. Inside were pieces of my life stacked in rows: Samuel's chair, my wedding china, the family albums, 2 lamps, the cedar box, 3 framed certificates, even the blue accordion file. I had to grip Lydia's arm to stay steady. They packed me away. I whispered. She squeezed my hand. No, they hid evidence. There is a difference between those 2 sentences, and understanding that difference gave me strength. Because hidden evidence can be found, and found evidence can speak. Inside the cedar box was the truth Daniel and Renee had never counted on. The original trust documents. Samuel had placed the house into the Opare family living trust after we paid off the mortgage, and after his death, I became sole trustee and lifetime beneficiary with full rights of occupancy and control. Any transfer out of the trust required a trustee execution, trust certification, and specific legal language. The quitclaim deed Daniel filed had none of that. It showed me signing as an individual, not as trustee. Ms. Carter read the papers twice, then looked up at me with a small, calm smile. "Mrs. Opare," she said, "your son recorded a deed on property you did not legally own in your personal capacity." I stared at her. She continued, in plain words, "He tried to transfer a house out of the wrong pocket." For the first time since I had seen my belongings on the lawn, I let myself inhale fully. Not victory, but possibility. That is when I noticed something else in the cedar box that changed everything. A sealed envelope in Samuel's handwriting. It said, "For Jessica, if anyone ever pressures you about this house." My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was a brief letter, written in Samuel's neat block print. "Jess, if you're reading this, somebody is probably trying to make you feel rushed, guilty, or confused. Remember this, the house is security, not charity. Help people if you choose, but never sign away your shelter for gratitude. A person who truly loves you will never demand your roof as proof of love." I had to stop reading. I put the letter to my chest and wept. Not because I was weak, because at that moment, even in death, my husband was protecting me. By then, Daniel and Renee had no idea how much I knew, and that ignorance made them bold. People get careless when they think they have already won. Renee texted me on a Monday at 9:11 in the morning. "We should all sit down like adults and discuss moving forward. No apology, no shame, moving forward." Ms. Carter advised me to respond simply, "I am available Thursday at 2:00 at your attorney's office or mine." That one message changed the tone immediately. Renee replied 6 minutes later, "We don't need lawyers involved." Exactly, I thought, because lawyers are where lies start losing breath. They agreed to meet at a cafe instead. Ms. Carter told me not to go, so I did not. Instead, I continued preparing, quietly, methodically, with more calm than I knew I possessed. We obtained the security footage from the bank branch, where Daniel had submitted one of the authorization changes. On the video, he appeared alone at the desk, despite forms later claiming I had been present. We subpoenaed notary records from the woman with the glossy red nails. Her journal was incomplete. 2 signatures did not match. The equity line paperwork listed inflated occupancy details and misstated household income. Every new fact added weight to the truth, and while I was gathering evidence, Daniel and Renee were growing more arrogant. Miss Gloria reported that Renee had started hosting little wine evenings in my backyard. She heard her telling guests, "We're finally making the place ours." Ruth discovered that a draft property listing had been created but not activated due to a title review issue. A title review issue? That phrase made a mess. Carter smiled in a way that should have frightened anybody standing on the wrong side of the law. Then, one evening at 6:32, Daniel called. His voice was soft, almost tender. The very sound of it hurt me because it reminded me of who he used to be. "Mom, can we talk?" I was sitting at Lydia's kitchen table with MS. Carter's notes spread in front of me. I put him on speaker so Lydia could hear. "You may speak," he exhaled. "Why are you making this bigger than it needs to be?" I closed my eyes for 1 second. That sentence, that casual shrinking of harm, that attempt to make my response the problem instead of his behavior. I said, "Bigger than it needs to be. You removed me from my own home." He spoke quickly, like he had rehearsed. "Mom, we were trying to create stability. You know Renee and I have been under pressure. The house needed structure. The house needed structure." I repeated. "So you erased me." He got quiet. Then he said, "You always make everything emotional." There it was. The old trick. When people cannot defend the facts, they attack the feeling. I answered calmly, "No, Daniel, I am making this factual. That is what frightens you." He inhaled sharply. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, "that you should be very careful what you do next." Then I ended the call. Lydia stared at me for a full second and said, "Well." I gave the smallest smile. I learned from a good husband and better enemies. The planning phase of my life did not look dramatic from the outside. It looked like folders, phone calls, certified mail, a yellow legal pad beside Lydia's fruit bowl. It looked like me sitting in the same armchair every morning at 7:00, reviewing timelines while the coffee brewed. It looked like replacing panic with preparation. I cannot tell you how empowering that was. Pain makes you feel scattered. Planning gathers you back to yourself. During that time, I also had to face a hard truth. I still loved my son. That was the most confusing part of all. I loved him, and I was building a case against him. I prayed over that contradiction many nights. I asked God, "Am I hardening my heart?" And the answer that came to me again and again was this: "No, you are hardening your boundaries. There is a difference." One Sunday after service, Ruth pulled me aside in the fellowship hall. "Jessica," she said quietly, "people are talking." I nodded. I assumed they would. "Do you want to know what they're saying?" I thought for a moment. "Yes," she said. "Some people say Daniel and Renee claim you voluntarily moved out and are now trying to punish them because you can't adjust to change." I felt heat rise in my chest, but only briefly. Because lies lose some of their power once you expect them. "What else?" I asked. Ruth hesitated. "A few people believe them." That stung, not because I needed the church to tell me who I was, but because betrayal often comes with a second injury. The rewriting of your story while you are still bleeding from the first. I straightened my shoulders. Then the truth will need good shoes, because it has some walking to do. Ruth smiled. "There she is." By the second week of May we were ready. MS. Carter filed an action to void the deed, freeze further encumbrance, and restore possession pending resolution. Because trust documents clearly contradicted the recorded transfer, the court moved faster than I expected. The bank, faced with possible fraud exposure, suspended activity on the home equity line, and still Daniel and Renee did not know. They were too busy counting a future that was already slipping through their fingers. Little did they know, I was 3 steps ahead. Then came the last straw. Miss Gloria called on a Friday morning at 10:08, her voice tight with anger. "Jessica, they're tearing up Samuel's rose bed." I stood so fast my chair scraped the floor. Outside the front bay window of my house, Samuel had planted 6 rose bushes the year we paid off the mortgage. 3 deep red, 3 pale yellow. He tended them every Saturday morning with old pruning shears and a transistor radio clipped to his belt. After he died, I kept those bushes alive like they were breathing pieces of him. "What do you mean tearing it up?" I asked. "I mean a landscaping crew is out there with shovels." I grabbed my purse so fast I nearly dropped it. MS Carter met me there before I reached the street. "Do not go onto that property," she warned. "Not yet," so we parked across the road. I watched from the car as 2 men loaded Samuel's rose bushes into the back of a trailer, while Renee stood in the yard, pointing at the ground with a coffee cup in her hand. I cannot describe the pain of seeing someone uproot the living memory of your marriage while laughing into a cell phone. My throat tightened so badly I thought I might choke. MS Carter touched my sleeve. "Look at me." I turned. She said, "This is exactly why we finish this properly. Not loudly, properly." I nodded, though tears had filled my eyes. At that moment, Daniel pulled into the driveway. He got out, glanced toward the yard, and did not stop them. That was my last soft thought about him, not because he took the house, not even because he lied, but because he watched what his father built being torn up and did nothing. That afternoon, MS Carter got word that Daniel and Renee had scheduled a family gathering at the house for Sunday after church. According to a cousin who had been invited, they planned to announce a new chapter and celebrate upcoming plans for the property. A celebration, inside my house, 2 days before the emergency possession hearing. Everything was about to change, and they had no idea it was coming. I did not sleep much the night before the hearing, not from fear, from readiness. There is a certain stillness that comes when you have done all you can do and the rest is about timing. At 5:40 in the morning, I sat at Lydia's kitchen table in a cream, colored blouse and navy skirt, drinking coffee I could barely taste. Samuel's letter was in my purse. MS. Carter's case binder was on the chair beside me. Lydia was making toast neither of us intended to eat. She looked over at me and said, "How do you feel?" I thought about it carefully. "Clear," I said, and that was the truth. Not vengeful, not hysterical, clear. The hearing itself was short, almost insultingly short compared to the months of pain that had led to it. Documents spoke, timelines spoke, trust records spoke, bank inconsistencies spoke. The judge reviewed the trust, the improper deed execution, the risk of wrongful disposal of personal property, and the evidence of threatened sale activity. At 11:18 a.m., he signed an emergency order restoring my exclusive possessory rights as trustee, beneficiary pending full adjudication, and authorized supervised re-entry with law enforcement presence. In plain language, the law said what I had known in my bones all along. That was my house. MS. Carter closed her folder and said, "Mrs. Opare, would you like to go home?" I cannot tell you what those words did to me. Would you like to go home? Yes. Yes, I would. But first, we had one more stroke of timing on our side. Daniel and Renee's little Sunday gathering had already begun. Cars lined both sides of Ashbury Lane when we arrived just after 1:30 in the afternoon. I recognized my cousin Bernice's silver sedan, Daniel's friend Marcus's truck, and at least 4 other vehicles belonging to people who had come to eat finger sandwiches in a house built on deceit. A county deputy stood with us at the curb. A licensed locksmith was 2 cars behind. MS. Carter carried the order in a slim leather folder. The music drifting from the backyard was soft jazz. Can you imagine that? Soft jazz. As if Betrayal could be made elegant with the right playlist. We walked up the front path together, deputy first, then MS. Carter, then me, then Lydia. My heart was beating hard, but my face was calm. The deputy knocked. Inside I heard footsteps, laughter, a chair scraping the floor, then the front door opened. Renee stood there in a white jumpsuit and gold earrings, holding a half-full wine glass. Her smile appeared automatically, then vanished. For 1 full second she could not speak. Behind her I could see guests turning toward the door, plates in hand. "Jessica," she said at last. I did not answer, the deputy did. "Ma'am, step aside." Her eyes flicked to his badge, then to MS. Carter, then to me. I watched the exact moment confidence left her body. Daniel came up behind her. "What's going on?" MS. Carter handed him the order. "This property is subject to an emergency court ruling restoring exclusive possessory rights to Mrs. Jessica Opare. You and any non-authorized occupants are to vacate immediately pending further proceedings." The room went silent, not quiet, silent, the kind of silence that makes the air feel heavy. Daniel scanned the first page and then looked up, pale. "This is ridiculous. No," I said finally, my voice steady. "This is overdue." He stared at me as though he had never seen me before. Maybe he hadn't. Maybe the version of me he knew was the woman who tolerated too much because she believed patience could fix what honesty would not. That woman was gone. Renee tried first. She lifted her chin and said, "There must be some mistake." Jessica signed the house over. MS. Carter replied, "Improperly executed, legally defective, and obtained under circumstances currently under review for fraud." Renee's lips parted, but no words came out. Then Daniel stepped onto the porch and lowered his voice. "Mom, can we talk privately?" I looked at him. Really looked at him. The man before me had my father's forehead, Samuel's hands, and none of the character, either of them, would have accepted in themselves. "There is nothing private about what you did to me," I said. He glanced toward the guests inside, embarrassed now that witnesses were present. "Interesting, isn't it? Cruelty often likes closed doors. Accountability does better in daylight. He said more urgently, Mom, don't do this here. I answered, you put me out here. The same words I had spoken weeks earlier, but this time they did not tremble. This time they landed. Behind him, Cousin Bernice whispered, my lord, to no one in particular. Renee recovered enough to say, we have guests. The deputy's expression did not change. Then I suggest you inform them the event is over. What happened next was not loud. That is important. Justice does not need screaming to be powerful. Guests began gathering purses and dishes in awkward silence. Some avoided my eyes. Some looked directly at me with dawning understanding. Marcus shook his head at Daniel and left without speaking. Bernice touched my arm on the way out and whispered, I'm sorry, Jessie. I didn't know. I know, I said. Then the real reckoning began. The locksmith changed the front lock, while Daniel stood in the foyer, holding the court order with shaking hands. Renee moved through the living room in stiff, angry motions, collecting handbags, car keys, and a dessert platter shaped like a sunflower. Every few minutes she muttered something under her breath about humiliation, legal overreach, or misunderstanding. Humiliation, that word again, not remorse for what was done, resentment for having to face consequences. Daniel made one last attempt as the deputy supervised the initial transfer of access. Mom, he said quietly, where are we supposed to go? I almost answered from habit. Almost said, maybe with Marcus, maybe with Renee's sister. Maybe we can work something out, but then I remembered the lawn. The trash bags, the changed locks, Samuel's rose bushes in the back of a trailer, and I understood something that changed me forever. Mercy without accountability is permission. So I said calmly, the same way you arranged where I would go. He flinched as if I had struck him. But I had not struck him. I had simply returned his own decision, stripped of comfort. Renee stepped forward then, anger burning openly now. You are enjoying this. I turned to her fully. No, if I were enjoying this, I would be the kind of person who could have done it first. She looked away first. That mattered more than I expected, because for weeks she had spoken to me like I was already erased. In that moment, she had to face me as a person again, a person with standing, a person with proof, a person with power. The deputy gave them 5 minutes to gather essentials and leave the premises pending further notice. Under MS Carter's advice, we documented the condition of every room as they moved through the house. Missing items were noted. Damage was photographed. The uprooted rose bed in the backyard was photographed too. At one point, Kayla came down the stairs clutching a stuffed rabbit and burst into tears when she saw me. Grandma, are you coming back? I knelt in front of her. Yes, baby, I said. I am. She threw her arms around my neck so tightly I nearly lost my balance. Over her shoulder, I saw Daniel close his eyes. Good. Let him feel one clean, honest pain amid the false life he built. Before leaving, he stopped near the door and turned back. Mom, I made mistakes. I stood in the foyer of my own house, one hand resting on the table where I had once set down his school permission, slips and lunch money. Mistakes, I said quietly, are forgetting milk at the store. This was strategy. He had no answer. And for the first time in my life, I did not need one. When the front door closed behind them, and the deputy nodded to let me know the house was secure, I stood in silence for a long moment. It did not feel like triumph. It felt like truth returning to the room. The air smelled faintly of perfume, catered food, and fresh, cut flowers from decorations Renee had placed near the fireplace. My fireplace, my living room, my walls. Lydia touched my shoulder. Do you want a minute? Yes, I whispered. She and MS Carter stepped outside. I walked slowly through the house, past the staircase, past the dining room, into the kitchen where Daniel once set papers beside the sugar bowl and told me not to worry. I put my hand on the counter and bowed my head. Samuel, I said softly, I'm home. Then I cried, not the shaking kind from Lydia's guest room, not the stunned tears of discovery. These were different. These were the tears of a woman who had been told she was powerless and had lived long enough to prove otherwise. But justice was not finished. The legal aftermath moved quickly once possession was restored. The defective deed was challenged formally, the bank withdrew reliance on the equity line pending fraud review, and an order was entered preventing sale or transfer of the property while the case continued. Because the trust documents were clear, the deeper proceedings became less about whether the house was mine and more about what consequences Daniel and Renee would face for trying to take it. And consequences came. The line of credit remained frozen. Their planned sale collapsed. The storage unit contents were catalogued and returned. Missing jewelry values were assessed. Unauthorized disposal of landscaping and property alterations were included in damages. Do you know what struck me most? Not one of those consequences required me to scream. Not one required revenge. Only records, witnesses, timing, and the courage to stop protecting people from the fallout of their own choices. About 10 days after I got back into the house, Daniel came alone. It was raining. A soft, steady rain like the day he first brought those papers into my kitchen. He stood on the porch holding no umbrella, just a folder under one arm, soaked at the shoulders. I opened the door but did not invite him in. He looked thinner, older somehow. "Mom," he said. "Yes." He swallowed hard. "Can I talk to you?" "You can talk from there." He closed his eyes briefly, accepting the line I had drawn. "Renee left to stay with her sister," he said. "Things are bad." I said nothing. He continued, "I know I don't deserve it, but I need you to believe I never thought it would go this far." That old habit rose in me again, the urge to help, to soothe, to make room for his discomfort, but I had learned too much by then. So I asked the question that mattered. "How far did you think throwing your mother out of her home would go?" He looked down. The rain ticked off the porch rail between us. Finally he said, "At first it was supposed to be temporary. Renee said if we had the title, we could refinance, pay off debts, fix the place up, and then everyone would benefit. She kept saying you would still live there." "And when did that change?" I asked. His jaw tightened. "After the loan money came through, then there were more bills than I knew about. Her business debt, credit cards, taxes. She said if we sold the house, we could start over somewhere cheaper." I listened without interrupting, not because his explanation excused him, but because sometimes hearing the full ugliness of a thing helps you bury hope where hope no longer belongs. He looked up at me then, eyes wet. "I should have stopped it." "Yes," I said. He nodded. "I should have told you the truth." "Yes." "I should never have let her talk to you that way." Something inside my chest tightened, but my voice stayed even. "You should never have needed her to be wrong in order for you to be right." That broke something in him. He pressed a hand over his face and stood there in the rain, trying not to cry like a little boy who had come home too late. I did not comfort him. That may sound harsh to some people, but let me tell you something I learned at 60. Sometimes comfort becomes camouflage. Some people will wrap themselves in your softness and call it repentance, when really they are just trying to escape the full weight of what they did. He lowered his hand and held out the folder. "It's a full inventory of what I know is still missing. Also, passwords, account details, copies of emails. I told my lawyer I want to cooperate." I took the folder, not as a mother, as the woman he had wronged. "Thank you," I said. Then he whispered, "Do you think you'll ever forgive me?" Now that is a question people ask too soon. Not because they want healing, but because they want relief. I answered him honestly, "I may forgive you one day, but forgiveness is not the same as access, Daniel." His face crumpled, and I let it, because truth, delivered calmly, can do work that anger never will. He nodded once, stepped back off the porch, and walked into the rain without another word. That was the last private conversation we had for a long while. As for Renee, she never came back in person. Her attorney sent messages. Her version changed 3 times. First I had consented fully. Then Daniel had handled everything, and she was merely a spouse. Then she had believed the transfer was lawful, and had acted in reliance. Lies tend to scatter when they are chased by records. Eventually, facing the documents, she agreed to a settlement framework involving repayment obligations, relinquishment of any claimed interest, and cooperation regarding the missing property. She did not apologize. Some people would rather lose everything than tell the truth with their own mouths. And maybe that is punishment enough. In the weeks that followed, I took my house back room by room. I rehung the family portraits in the hallway. I brought Samuel's leather chair up from the basement. I opened every window one Saturday morning and let the whole place breathe. Kayla came to visit with supervised arrangements set through the family attorneys and later through counseling recommendations. She cried when she saw her old room restored. "Grandma, are you mad at me?" she asked. I knelt and held both her hands. "Oh, baby, no, never. I didn't know what was true," she whispered. "I know." That child had been living inside confusion built by adults. She needed gentleness, not loyalty tests. So we started small. Cookies in the kitchen, homework at the oak table, braiding hair in the evenings again when visits were allowed. I made it my mission that one betrayal would not become a generational inheritance. Because pain travels through families if nobody stops to name it, and I intended to stop it. The yard took longer. Samuel's rose bed was damaged badly, but not beyond saving. With help from Miss Gloria's nephew, we located 4 of the 6 bushes at a landscaping yard where they had been dropped off. I bought them back with my own money and replanted them myself. That day, with dirt under my fingernails and my knees aching, I felt more powerful than I had in court. Because power is not only in winning, power is in rebuilding what somebody thought they could destroy. A month later, Ruth came by with lemon loaf and sat with me on the porch while we watched the evening settle over Ashbury Lane. She said, "You seem lighter." I thought about that. I am lighter, I said, but not because the pain disappeared, because I stopped carrying what was never mine. She tilted her head. "Meaning, his greed wasn't mine, her cruelty wasn't mine, their lies weren't mine. I was carrying shame that belonged to the people who created the harm." Ruth smiled slowly. "That'll preach." I laughed, and do you know what? It would. Aftermath is a quiet thing. Most stories end at the confrontation because that is where the excitement is. But real life continues after the papers are served and the locks are changed. Real life asks, "Who are you now?" In the months after I came home, I answered that question carefully. I updated my estate plan. I appointed a neutral professional rust advisor in case of future incapacity. I created written property instructions. I installed cameras not from fear, but from wisdom. I began volunteering 1 Saturday a month at a senior resource center, helping older women understand basic documents, beneficiary forms, deed records, and banking alerts. Not because I had become bitter, because I had become informed. There is a difference. One afternoon after a workshop, a widow about my age took my hand and said, "You made me feel less embarrassed." I told her, "Good, embarrassment protects the wrong people." That may be one of the truest things I have ever said. As for Daniel, our relationship did not magically heal. This is not that kind of story. We began, eventually, with supervised conversations in a counselor's office. Hard conversations, slow conversations, conversations where he had to say exactly what he had done without hiding inside words like misunderstanding, pressure, stress, or mistake. Only truth, and only then did something like repair become possible. Will our relationship ever be what it was before? No, some doors reopen. Others become walls with windows. You may still see the person through them. You may even speak, but you do not pretend the structure is the same. Renee moved on to another town, I was told. New apartment, new online business, new story probably. Some people keep changing locations because they never learn that the real trouble travels in their own reflection. And me, I stayed. I stayed in the house I built. I stayed in the life I earned. I stayed long enough to watch Samuel's roses bloom again. And I learned lessons I wish I had never needed, but I am grateful to know. I learned that silence does not mean weakness. Sometimes silence is strategy. I learned that family is not a free pass for disrespect. Love should feel safe, not negotiated at the edge of loss. I learned that older women are often expected to be endlessly giving, endlessly patient, endlessly forgiving. But let me tell you this clearly: generosity is a gift, not a duty others can weaponize, and I learned that standing up for yourself is not cruelty. It is stewardship of your peace, of your dignity, of the life God gave you to protect. So if you are listening to my story tonight and something in it feels familiar, if someone has been using your kindness as a ladder to climb over you, if someone keeps calling your pain overreactions